Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. Thien Pham is a talented comic book artist, writer, and illustrator known for his contributions to the world of graphic novels. His creative endeavors include works like Sumo, Level Up, and collaborations with authors such as Gene Luen Yang. Thien generously recounts his journey in the world of comics and shares his origin story. Thien is also a high school teacher and discusses why Asian American and Pacific Islander history is significant for students. We also discuss his graphic memoir, Family Styles, his biographic book about his family's immigrant story beautifully told through the lens of food. I am also grateful to Thien for being a contributing illustrator to the Make Us Visible Florida Asian American History Activity Book. Available soon. Visit makeusvisible.org to order a copy. I've been enjoying these conversations and hope you have too. If you have, please rate my podcast on your platform of choice and share it with others. If you would like to support with a donation to help keep this podcast going and support the work I do, you can become a patron of the show by visiting my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan. For comments or suggestions, reach out on social media at SifuMimiChan. Now, on with the show. Hello, Thien. Nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you guys. How you doing?
I am good. I was talking to you a little bit off air and I told you, wow, I feel like I know you already because I know so many of your BFFs and you're kind of like always talked about and always in posts and so I just feel very familiar.
Yeah, I mean it's a nice community. You know, we are all, every one of us have known each other through different things for a very long time. Like all the art community, especially comics and graphic novels, is a pretty close knit. So yeah, we tend to be friends. And then, you know, when I entered the graphic novel, there's only a small group of Asian artists, and we definitely looked out for each other, and we definitely formed a bond. So typically, I know it's like a bad stereotype to think that like one Asian knows another Asian, but you know, we formed such a tight bond that like if you know Gene Yang, he probably knows, you know, who are familiar with a lot of us other Asian cartoonists. And so it's helped in my career, and I think it's helped in a lot of people's career, as that like tightness that we have.
Yes. No, I have come to find how extraordinarily friendly you all are with one another. And
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because just even working on this project, my Make Us Visible Florida activity book, I've of course been reaching out to Asian American artists. And of course, it is a little bit of can you introduce me to this person or that person? And it's been just overwhelming and remarkable at how generous you all have been with your time and your efforts and your willingness to participate in my activity book. And I am just beside myself. I've been in edit mode. I don't know if you know what that's like, proofreading and editing, right?
I don't
like this job at all.
I don't like the proof editing.
Right?
I'm not good at it. So I'm always like, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going through it and I'm just, again, overwhelmed at all of the artists that said yes, but all of the artists also who just couldn't do it because of time, but no one actually said like flat out no, so everybody was just incredible. And so thank you so much on behalf of the entire team, and all Floridians here, but like, thank you for being a part of this and, dedicating time. I know you are very busy. I just found out you are a school teacher.
I am a school teacher.
That makes you extra busy in addition to a professional artist, but thank you so much for being a part of this. It's super special.
I love it.
Oh my gosh. So tell me how you kind of got your start in illustration and cartoonists, because I don't know your origin story. I only know that you like noodles and eating and things like that from social.
When I was in fourth grade, I'm an immigrant. I came over from I'm an immigrant that came over from Vietnam when I was 5. Mm-hmm. So I had always struggled with the English language, and I never read. I wasn't an avid reader. I was just always struggling with the language. I couldn't read really well until I was in fourth grade, and And when I got my leasing money, which is like, my debt money, um, I went to the 7-Eleven to buy candy. And besides the candy counter, there was a comic book there. That they used to sell comics in 7-Eleven. And I bought a comic book instead of spending my money on candy. I bought a comic book because the cover looks so cool. And so I bought that comic, and I got home. It was a Spider-Man. It was a Spider-Man versus Moon Knight comic, and I started looking at it because I love the pictures so much. I've always loved like cartoons and stuff like that, so I thought I would be into it. And as I was reading the comic, I found that I was starting to like read like this
Oh,
comic, like, and
yeah.
like I had never really, like, to that point I had never really read anything. Like I've read sentences and stuff like that in school, but I've never really read a full story or a full book. And so when I started to understand the English words because of the pictures and stuff like that, I started to like really everything started to click. And pretty soon I was able to read that whole story, and I was like, this is magical. And I had already been in love with like superheroes and robots and all ninjas and stuff like that from watching cartoons. And so I fell in love with comics right there and then. And right that day, I decided I was going to be a comic book artist when I grew up.
Wow.
And like my whole life was like is going towards that direction because like when I was a kid, I drew comics and made my mom Xerox it, and I took it to school, and I was just surrounded with comics from that point on. I buy comics every week. I drew comics, and I went to art school. I had to convince my parents. Obviously, my parents, they were Asian parents, so they were like, "No, we want you to go to a 4-year university and become a doctor or a lawyer or engineer or whatnot." And I tried, and then finally, I was like, "Mom, this is all I want to do." And they sent me
Yeah.
to they begrudgingly sent me to art school, and I went to art school, and when I got out of it, it was like the only thing I wanted to do was draw comics. But the comics after art school, the comics that I wanted to draw were no longer like superhero comics and stuff like that. I wanted to draw comics that was like more about life and about,
Mhm.
you know, just with themes that weren't superhero. So I as I just started drawing them and Xeroxing them and trying to sell them to stores and stuff like that. And I was feeling how it was so weird to be like at 20, at 20, I was probably like 21 at the time, doing the exact same thing I did when I was in fourth grade, just Xeroxing my own comics and trying to sell it. And I found this a whole community of people that were doing the exact same thing. And in fact, what I did was I found a community in Oakland. And it was a group of guys, no, not just guys, but a group of people that would meet at this a friend's house. His name was Jason Shiga, and we called it Art Night Crew. And the majority of the people that would meet there were Asian. It was Gene Yang and Derek Kirk Kim, and
Wow.
this is
Yeah.
all back when nobody was reading our comics, and we were all like Xeroxing our comics and try to sell it store to store, and we just formed a bond, and ever since then we've just been doing comics together this whole time. And every time someone would get an opportunity, they would recommend another person. And, through Gene, I got my first book deal. And ever since then, we just been, I've just been working on our craft together. Yeah.
Wow, that is amazing. And
Yeah.
just the image of you as a fourth grader, Xeroxing and making, and then as a 21-year-old, kind of
Doing the
graduate,
same
like
thing.
Xeroxing and making. It's hilarious, but I'm sure that the art had evolved by then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hopefully.
Oh no, I've seen your work and it's so much fun. And I love that what you mentioned though, because actually I tend to gravitate towards different stories, not just superhero stories, as a fan of comics and graphic novels. And I'm really excited actually I'm going to admit I haven't read Family Style yet, but I'm excited to pick that up and kind of get into that because I think it's such a fascinating way to learn. And I know Gene is really big on education through comics and things like that. And I just definitely am a big advocate for it because I feel like what you just said, you learn to read because you picked up a comic and you're like, wow, I'm actually reading. And there's just something really magical about that. Kind of talking about our Make Us Visible Florida activity book. And I know I kind of just pinged you out of nowhere and definitely name drop, like, by the way, I'm not a crazy
Yeah,
person,
yeah,
like Gene's worked with
yeah.
me, I've been vetted, but you're a teacher, and for me, I'm really fascinated to kind of hear your take on Asian American history and why it's so important and why that is necessary. Like, I know why I started this and why I'm advocating for it and fighting so hard on my, this is not my main job. It's volunteer work. But as a teacher, can you kind of share like the significance of Asian American history being taught?
Yeah, growing up, we never really learned Asian history. You know, in schools we never really learned it, and the one difference between, well, not, I don't know if it's the difference, but the thing about our culture, especially my Vietnamese heritage, is that our parents don't want to talk about these things. I found that my
Yeah.
parents did not tell me. They waited till I was 48 to tell me about our immigration to America. They never told
Yeah.
me the story about us coming to America. The details of the Vietnam War, for example, that they lived through and that I was part of the aftermath of, I never really knew. They never sat me down and told us those histories. A lot of it, I think, is because of immigrant parents' their thing of like trying to protect their kids, from
Yeah.
like hardships and trauma. And I think it's all, like, and another is that they were all just working so hard all the time. It wasn't a thing where they would sit down and say, "Here is our history." And I think they also assumed that we were getting that at school. But when we went to school, we were not getting any history, Asian history. And if we were getting any Asian history, it was through the lens of America, the United States. So it wasn't the history, our history as per se. So when I got older and I started to like read, and I started read stuff about our history and research stuff about our history for certain things, my eyes were just very open. It felt like I had this whole world that I had never really seen. I've never really
Yeah.
been part of. Um, and the more you learn, the more well-rounded I become. There was a point in my life, like probably through from junior high to high school, where I pretty much rejected my Asian heritage. Like coming up, once you become Americanized, and I had American friends, uh, and and I was just basically saying, well, now I'm American. I'm not Vietnamese, and I kind of rejected that side of myself. And partly that is because I don't know the history of my people and our world. And now that I do, and I hear the stories of, just last year, 2 years ago, I sat down with my parents and I said, "Mom, it's time. You should tell me the story of us coming to America."
Yeah.
Um, and it wasn't until then. It had been, I was 40, I was 46 at the time.
Yeah.
And they were finally like, "Okay, you're 46. We're older too. And let's talk about it." And when they
Wow.
told me the story, I was like just so moved by it. I was just so moved with gratitude and about the sacrifices that my family made, and the sacrifices that like all the families have made. Like, if you know a Vietnamese person here in America, their family made that same sacrifice. Their family made that same hard trip to America that my family did. And a lot of it goes untold, until so I was so moved, and I was so had just overwhelming feeling of gratitude that I went home that day and started drawing this comic, and I think that is so important, and it's something that I hope now that we have more generations here in America that is going to be a more normal thing to share our history. And that's why when you told me about this, your project, I was like, I'm going to do it. And really, anybody that has any project that deals with, recognition of Asian American history or Asian American presence at all, I want to be a part of, you know?
Yeah, no, I'm so overwhelmed. It's been such an amazing journey, but yeah, thank you for sharing all of that because I feel very similarly, as a matter of fact, even though I had heard a lot of stories growing up and there was a little more, I didn't have to wait till I was 46. I didn't have to wait as long, but I did a documentary on my father actually. And I know
Oh,
you drew in the Pui-Chan unit. So he through that lens, literally, right? Through that project, I learned so much from taking the time to sit down and say, okay, we're going to go through this, even though you hear bits and pieces and you have a narrative. And, because my father is who he is, his story has been a little bit more public, but there were so many details and so much of the history that had I not really sat down to listen to preserve, it would have been lost, right? And so goes also all the story of Asian American pioneers and people who have just contributed so much to the founding and building of this country that I look back and I knew none of growing up. As a child, I didn't get to see myself reflected in the history books. And so that's why this project is so important to me and why this initiative is so important to me. And so for you as a teacher, though, how do you think it may change the narrative for kids learning more about Asian American history versus maybe, what you said, like you kind of learned one version of American
yeah.
history, but it didn't really include all the stories, immigrant stories. It didn't include a lot of the things that we want to share. How do you think that might change for this next generation if we can really get this done across the
Yeah.
nation, which I really feel we can?
Yeah, I when I was started writing this book, I noticed that there were a couple of stories already in the media that were about the Vietnamese diaspora, coming over
Yeah.
to America. They were very similar to my story, and I was like, oh well, maybe no one needs my story now, because there's all these other stories out.
Mm.
But I was so wrong, when I wrote the story and I started putting it on Instagram, and even when it came out, so many kids, my students, came to me and said, Mr. Pham, I read your book, and it was awesome because my family, my grandma or my mom went through the same journey, and I knew nothing about it. And then when I read your book and I asked them about it, and they told me about it, and it was something that I had never learned before. And I hope that because this next generation is getting a certain age where we are, like I look around now and there are so many amazing Vietnamese writers. There's so many amazing Asian writers out there. If you look at the Kidlit, there's like Thien Nguyen, and there's Brandon Hong, and there's Min Lei, and we're all writing stories. It doesn't may not have like it all has a point of view of a Vietnamese American. And if I had grown up in that world where I can easily access books and from these great American like T. Bui or G.B. Tran and Gene Yang, I would not only understand my culture more, but have this desire to do more research and want to know more. And that's what I hope this next generation will have. Like they will have so much access to like and your activity book is a perfect gateway, especially for the younger kids, into learning about our Asian history and then wanting to know more and getting into more books that deals with that. And I think that's got to be great because when I look at it, I think I am doing books for myself for the fourth grade tin, the books that fourth grade tin didn't have, and
Yeah.
and that makes me happy,
Yeah.
knowing that kids when I don't have those books when I was a kid, but kids in the next generations will. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well said, well said. And I'm excited because one of the things I do want to talk to you about is food and how that really brings us all together. And one of the chapters in our book is actually on the Mills 50 area here in Central Florida, which is known
Oh,
as
okay.
a lot of Vietnamese refugees
Oh,
actually
wow.
kind of gravitated towards this area. And we have a ton of pho noodle houses
Oh,
and a
nice.
ton of, it's just actually pretty popular. Actually, nationally, a lot of people know about this like little niche area. And
Yeah.
it's a really special area. And unfortunately, someone had already picked that to draw. Otherwise, I definitely would have had you draw the food thing. But it's really great because it definitely highlights like all these different facets of even somewhere like Florida, which is not as diverse as a lot of the other states in terms of Asian American, percentage. But we were able to find so much of history to be able to share with our local Floridians that entail that. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about, your art process. And I know that I gave you kind of a thing to pick from, like, what would you like to draw?
Yeah,
Our book
yeah,
is not just coloring, it's an activity book. And you're like, I'll do the Kung Fu thing.
yeah.
And I didn't know at that time you didn't realize the connection between me and my father.
Oh, I didn't know. It was
But
great.
yes,
Now I know.
yes, now you know.
Yeah,
And so tell me about that.
food has always been important. Like, that's what I've noticed when I grew up. Food was a huge part of my life, and one of my first job as a comic book artist was to do a comic strip food reviews for a newspaper. So I would go to restaurants and do reviews, and when the first generation of foodies came out, you can tell that a lot of foodies are Asian, because food is so important in our culture. It's really the thing
Yeah.
that like brings us all together, you know, um, and it's so important to our culture, and so of course we would love food, and for
Mhm.
me it was very important to my family. One of the things that when I was writing this book, I didn't know how to tell this story. I didn't have a path into my story until my mom asked me, she said, "Hey, what do you remember from our trip to America?" And when I was telling her what I remembered, I said, "Oh, Mom, yeah, I remember. The only thing I really remember is, you gave me that rice ball when I was in, and I remember the potato chips." And I realized as I was telling her this that all my memories are all based in food. Like they're all food memories. And that's why I decided to write my book in through the lens of food memories, because that's how I remember things. And
Yeah.
even to this day, that's how I remember things. And what I love about like our Asian community is that even areas that like Florida, or there's so many areas that I've been to on this book tour where there might not be a huge Asian community, but everybody knows this one area that has, like one enclave that has a lot of Asian foods.
Yes.
And I try to visit all of them. Like I want to eat pho in Austin, Texas, and
Yes.
in Seattle, and in everywhere I go, I try to visit it, and I love that. It's such a community, and they're all next to each other, and they all probably know each other, and so that food community I think is really important, almost as important to me as the food itself. Like,
Mhm.
and I love the kind of like one of the neat things about the food scenes nowadays with immigrant communities is that social media has really helped out a lot. Like when I ask my mom now, like, "Mom, where can I get this dish like pancel?" And she's like, "Oh, I know this place. It's only on Facebook." But it's such a great community of food culture, and that's one of the things that I makes me the most excited about traveling around and going to these communities and having like food all around. So yeah,
All
I
right.
love
Well,
that.
you got to come to Orlando then, and you got
I
to come to
will.
Mills
I
50,
will.
and I will take you for
Well,
some pho.
Orlando, I know that there's a big Vietnamese
Yes.
enclave in Orlando as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah,
So you've got to come out. That's it. Like we
yeah, I
have
will.
we're
I
gonna
will.
schedule a time. We're gonna schedule a time because I feel left out. I haven't had noodles with you yet or anything.
Okay, let's
I
make
just
that
see you
happen.
eating noodles all the time. But is that your favorite, by the way? Like, what's your favorite dish?
Well, I mean, I eat pho or any types of noodles anytime. I did this whole thing before my book came out where I would eat a bowl of noodles a day until my book came out. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so for 90 days, every day I ate a bowl of noodles, and people will be like, "Was that hard?" Like, no, I can eat noodles every day. There's like no shortage of noodles in my life. You know, like that's not hard. It's like asking if it's hard to eat rice every day. I
Right.
can't eat rice every day, just like I can eat noodles every day. So yeah,
Okay, fair
I
enough.
love it.
See,
Pho
well,
is
this
probably
is,
my
but okay.
yeah,
Yeah, well,
yeah,
this makes sense because this is why I associate you with noodles, and I don't even really. This is the
yes,
first time we've met in person, and I already know this about
yeah.
you. So you're very,
Well, if you
very open
follow me
about
on
it.
if you follow me on Instagram, you can see 90 days of me eating noodles.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm gonna have to scroll back and check that out. But tell me a little bit, and we're gonna probably show some of the artwork that you worked on and for the book. But you kind of chose to do like the martial arts thing because I didn't have a
Yeah.
bowl of noodles for you to draw. Tell me why you chose that, and was it challenging? Did you do it in like 10 minutes because you're just that good, or how was that?
It was very challenging
Okay.
because I have always been a martial arts fan. Like
Oh,
growing up, of course, I've loved all the martial arts movies, especially the ones from China. Um, like the Five Venoms and all the Shaw
yes,
Brothers movies,
yes,
and you
yes.
know, so I've always loved those as a kid. And I remember as a kid. This is embarrassing, but I would have notebooks where I would draw kind of stick figure drawings of my own moves.
I love it.
Because I would just I know not knowing nothing about martial arts, and again, my family was we didn't have a lot of money, so I was never able to take any martial arts, even though I wanted to. But I would just draw my own moves, and then it would just be books and books of just like different variation of kicks and blocks and stuff.
Oh my
And
gosh,
so I've always loved it.
I
And
love it.
then when I grew up, my a lot of my close friends became really into Tai Chi and Qigong
Hmm.
and other martial arts, and uh what is the Bruce Lee one? I forgot the Bruce Lee one, but
Like Jikundo and
yeah,
okay,
yeah, and um, and then I got a little bit involved in Tai Chi as well. I was taking Tai Chi
okay,
class when I was drawing this. I was taking Tai Chi classes.
good. It was
I'm not
relaxing.
very. I'm terrible at it.
That's okay.
Because I don't really know my left from my right, so I'll be doing something, and then I'll look at the person next to me, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm on the wrong side, you
Oh,
know. So, but I enjoyed it. So when I was drawing this, the hard part is when I draw, it's hard to draw a figure that is has a kind of a fluidity of movement that you want
okay.
from a martial arts. Like
Yeah.
even if you to look at the photographs of your father doing his poses, it's just so fluid. It just feels like nothing is forced.
Okay.
Like the his body is just in a natural position that just feels like it belongs there, and not like
Hmm.
and like when you draw superheroes, they're always like tense and stuff like
Oh,
that. But when you're
okay.
drawing martial arts, it's like water. It's like very fluid.
Yes.
So it's hard to capture that, and that's why it was such a challenge. Even if
Oh,
you have
wow.
the reference, you're drawing it, it just feels like everything just feels so static. And what you're
Okay.
trying to do is draw something that is a little bit more fluid, that doesn't look like it's hard poses, as opposed to kind of like, you know what I mean? It's a little hard to
Yeah.
explain,
No,
but
that's actually a perfect explanation because you take for granted when you see it all the time, but you're
yeah,
right. When you see a pose of a kung fu master or someone who really knows what they're doing with their body, it doesn't look forced. It looks very natural, like they're meant to be
yeah,
in that position. And
yeah,
I can only imagine, like you said, like to kind of recreate that, there's a dynamic there that I am zero of an artist. So I
yeah.
I
So
wouldn't know how that approaches, but
so in like if I was drawing just a normal pose, I would draw like stick figure or block figures of doing something. But
yes.
with this drawing, instead of doing that, what I did was a lot of sweeping curves.
Right.
That like the rough draft of each one of the posers, these like sweeping curves and movements of the spine and stuff like that, and then going back in and then filling that in with like solids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like it's the undercurrent is more curve and a little bit more like fluid than what you would normally do.
I
Yeah.
see. Oh my gosh. Thank you for breaking that down. That was actually way more detailed explanation than I expected to get. And I learned quite a lot actually just hearing
Sorry
you
about
talk
that.
about it. So no, I'm appreciative actually. That was really awesome.
Okay.
Thank you for that. No, I think it's going to be great because we'll definitely kind of sneak peek and show people what that looks like. And now I feel a little bad because I was like, oh, draw like 5 of them.
No, it was great. It was fun to do. It wasn't like, I like that kind of thing. It's very fun to do.
Yes.
It's
And what's really cool. Go ahead.
it's better than if you said, "Hey, draw 5 backgrounds of trees." Like that's not as fun to do.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm glad you did have fun with it. And, like I said, just behalf on our whole team, like we're so appreciative to have, someone of your caliber, like contributing to this project. But, now that you've explained, I'm like, wow. And then you had to draw several Grandmaster Chans, not just one. So I very much appreciate that. And it's going to be so much fun for kids because it's not just a coloring book, but it's also an activity book. So they can color and do the activity, which yours happens to be kind of a matching thing. And, just a really fun activity. So I just want to thank you so much for that. And it was really, it was great to kind of talk to you finally.
In something so fun.
Oh my gosh. It's my honor, honestly. So, all right, Thien. Well, is there anything you want to share about any of your upcoming projects? I know in your bio, you're always working on your next graphic novel, teaching and eating a lot.
Yeah. I have a book coming. I have a graphic novel I'm drawing now, but it hasn't been announced yet.
Oh, okay.
But right now I'm really just kind of just traveling around promoting Family Style.
Okay.
So
everyone, please pick up Family Style. I'll link that here for everybody. Oh, there it is. Yes, and I will definitely put that in the notes for everybody to just do one click and get a copy because who doesn't love food? Who doesn't love learning more about immigrant stories and just kind of delving into that Asian American history? Thank you for sharing your Asian American history. Also, that's super important to share those stories. Like you said, it starts the conversation, which is super important for all of us, not just kids.
Yes.
Thank
you so much, Mimi.
Thank you so much. That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram or Facebook.